Has been a challenging year, the year 2020. It came with its own basket of challenges. We all know about coronavirus, which has battered the global economy, shattered supply chains, and of course upended life as we have always known it. And the question is, what does the year 2021 portend for the nation and for the world as well? Good morning. This is the year 2020 in focus. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Thank you for finding time to be with us. At O'Brien Kimani is my Twitter handle. At KBC Channel 1 is the Twitter that we are using this morning as we look forward for the issues that will shape the year 2021. And of course, the issues that shaped the year 2020. And asking ourselves, what lessons do we carry on board for now and for the future? We are joined by a team of eminent personalities, both from the private as well as the public sector. And I'll start with the people in the studio with us this morning. We are in the good company of James Macharia. He's the Cabinet Secretary for Ministry of Transport, Housing, as well as Urban. Thank you so very much indeed, Waziri, for joining us.
Thank you.
And next to him, we have Sylvester Kasuku. He is the CEO and Director General of LAPSET. Thank you so very much indeed, Kasuku, for finding time to be with us this morning. And we also have Dr. Engineer Joseph Njoroge. He's the PS or Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Energy. Thank you very much, sir, for finding time to be with us as well. And next to him, we have Engineer Francis Gitau. He's the Acting Director General and CEO of NAMATA, as well as the Infrastructure Secretary. Thank you, sir, for finding time. And of course, virtually, we have Dr. James Mwangi. He is the CEO of Equity Group, as well as the immediate chair of Vision 2030 Delivery Board. Daktari, asante sana for your time. Can you hear me, Daktari?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you very much for finding time as well to be with us. We'll also be joined by the CS or Cabinet Secretary in charge of Trade and Industrialization. This is Betty Minor. She'll be joining us shortly, but we already have the team in studio with us. The whole point is to look at the challenges that we went through as a nation, how we overcame them, and of course, the lessons that we carry into the year 2021 and beyond. Welcome, as I said, your contribution is highly welcome at O'Brien Kimani, at KBC Channel 1. Keep them coming. I want to start with you, gentlemen. First of all, I want to start with you, Kasuku. In 1 minute, how would you describe the year 2020 for you?
Thank you very much, O'Brien. Definitely the year 2020 can be described as a challenging year, a year that called for innovation, it called for creativity, it called for thinking outside the box, and it called for strategizing on how we can be more resilient to challenges that are of global nature, and that also really does show us where we have deficits that we need to address.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll definitely be addressing those issues, the issues of challenges and deficit and how we manage to overcome them. Coming to you, Waziri, how would you describe the year 2020 in 1 minute?
Well, if I could describe it not in 1 minute, but just one word, is very, very challenging, not just for my ministry, but I think for the entire globe. You've seen almost all sectors globally have been affected, and so we're not an exception, especially given that infrastructure is one area which is very capital intensive. Mm-hmm. But having said that, we have received or achieved quite a number of deliverables.
We'll be talking about them. I want to turn on to you, Dr. James Mwangi. In 1 minute, let us know, how would you describe the year 2020 in a minute?
I would describe this year very, very challenging and eventful year that changed the way we look at things. With performance in terms of balance sheet and profitability. But this year, it was survival, resilience, and the support we gave our customers to be able to and to thrive and support livelihoods. It was community support as opposed to profitability.
Very well. I'll be coming back to you.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Ari.
I just said thank you.
Yeah, well, I'll be coming back to you because one of the success stories in the banking sector is the fact that Equity Group became the first 1 trillion shillings bank, not only in Kenya, but in the greater East African East and Central Africa, and we'll be coming to discuss these success stories of the banking sector. So I'll be coming back to you. I want to go to Engineer. How would you describe the year?
Thank you, O'Brien. The year has been quite a challenge. All businesses operate in environment, and once the environment impacts challenges, then those challenges, you must either adapt to them and live with them. However, based on the momentum that we had built over the years, all the way back from 2013, we were able to continue making some gains. And despite those challenges, I would say that we have continued to build on the infrastructure of power, which has enabled us to supply and adequately offer services to Kenyans.
Mm-hmm. And I know that one of the key flagship projects of the government was the project Powering Kenya, ensuring that there is quality power for Kenyans, and which is competitive as well. We'll be discussing that. And of course, the electrification program of rural areas as well as public schools. We'll be discussing that and how it was affected. Let's come back to Engineer Francis Getaus. How would you describe the year?
I think, as my colleagues have described the year as challenging, yes, it has been a year of major disruption to global business processes. However, there has been great mileage that has been gained by all the sectors, public and private, in terms of business process re-engineering and being able now for the private-public sector to think together. And there has been some gains. Of course, everybody is very saddened with the heavy loss in human life. Mm-hmm. But I think this is a year that has brought about the new paradigm of thinking, service to the public, rethinking businesses, processes, and of course, bringing new innovations into the economic space and social space. Mm-hmm. So it's been challenging, but also bringing about new opportunities.
Mm-hmm. And of course, it's proper to say that Esna Matter definitely, a number of points, scored. We saw the construction of the first rapid bus system along Thika Road. We have also seen the railway transport, is coming back to life, after many years of failed attempt. And these are successes, that we rarely talk about as a nation. And we focus so much on, the areas that we are not getting it right, and we forget that there are so many other areas, that we are getting things right. I want to hear from you, Sylvester. I mean, at first, there was all this confusion about how are we going to survive, the COVID dilemma. I mean, it was battering major economies in Europe. We remember how Italy was almost brought down, by the pandemic. And on the day that we announced to the world that we have the first case of COVID-19 here in Kenya, I mean, we all went into panic mode, and there was confusion. How are we going to emerge out of this? I want first of all to hear from you. When you heard that, as a country we have the first case of COVID-19, how did you react? Did you go down on your knees to pray? Did you cry? Did you run away? How did you react?
Definitely, O'Brien, The news of recording the first COVID case in Kenya was something that I would say that we expected, to come up, because we are part of the global family. And we also do know that people travel from different parts of the globe, and the best thing to do was to actually be ready to deal with this situation. And when we had that announcement, definitely we had to get into a mode of managing the situation, because that is what was needed. We couldn't really start to run away from ourselves. We, as the servants of the public sector, had to find the best way to address the issue, because that was in the interest of Kenyans. And specifically for the LAPSSET corridor program, we had a number of sites with activity, construction activities, for example, the Lamu Port. We had to get into a mode of making sure that that site was secured. And securing the site meant that we had to avoid external accesses into that port construction area, because as at that time, there was no COVID case within the construction camps. So that enabled us, therefore, to contain that environment, to keep it pure and to keep it safe. And as such, work continued. We didn't stop work. Again, the situation also called for the idea of making sure that those people who are within that camp had to be provided with the necessary services, so that, again, they don't go and mix with the populations outside that particular area. And it enabled us to continue with the work quite well. Progress has been made. I believe you've been seeing the progress being made in terms of the construction works.
I was there in September with you.
Yes, and if you go there now, you would again be shocked.
It's a different world.
Absolutely.
Altogether.
Yes.
And it's also good to factor in, or to consider the fact that, this crisis of COVID came at a time when, you were also dealing, or the area around Lamu was dealing with another crisis of insecurity. Remember, in January, there was an attack, there was a terror attack, around Lamu, that affected, the operations of the port. And it would be interesting, and I'll be coming back to you to find out, how did you make such a significant turnaround, in the face of such immense challenges? We'll be coming back to hear this from you. But now I want to turn to Dr. James Mwangi. The banking sector, for the longest time, we knew that for you to do banking or to do transaction, a lot of people, they're accustomed to going to the banks to make transactions. But a time came when this now was considered to be unnecessary. I want to hear from you, Dr. as a bank. How did you manage to adapt to the new normal that we now had to live in?
Thank you very much. First, banking was declared as an essential service, so we had to remain open despite the challenges. But at the same time, we had to comply with the COVID protocols that had been issued by government and Ministry of Health. Of particular challenge was the fact that banking traditionally has always involved movement of staff and customers, and aggregating at the banking hall where services are offered. Banking has always been the place you go and where you are received by the staff and served. And this then could not comply with the two main protocols of supporting people to stay at home, and at the same time to avoid mobility or big movement that was not necessary. At the same time, social distancing. Banking halls are not built to accommodate social distancing. And so this offered a huge challenge. And the first thing, of course, was to try and make the basic requirements in the banking hall suitable, like having sanitizers, having social distancing within the banking halls, but that could not be adequate. So banks turned into virtualizing banking. And to virtualize banking required a whole lot of work, digitizing the processes, and giving credentials to customers and converting banking from where you go to what you do on devices. And essentially, COVID acted as a tailwind to digitization. And today, banks like Equity Bank has 98% of all transactions happening outside the banking hall. This would never have happened if we didn't have COVID acting as a tailwind to fast-track adoption. The second aspect was collaborative effort by the banking industry and its regulator. The Central Bank of Kenya brought the banking industry together in the telecom to try and create incentives for adoption of digital. We made all mobile banking charges, and essentially that made a significant difference in the lives of the customers, and consequently, they adopted it because of alignment of interest. And that was more the trunk of our banking industry, making it very resilient and adaptive to the environment. And truly, we can say the banking industry has been fully transformed.
Very well. Thank you. I'll be coming back to you, Dr. because we would want to find out, when the moratorium was placed on payments of interest. This, of course, had a knock-on effect, on the banking industry, and we'll be coming back to find out. As a banking sector, how has this somehow turned out to be? Is it a crisis now? Is it business as usual? So I'll be coming back to you. But let's now turn on to Waziri. If there was a ministry that was tasked that had a lot of responsibility in ensuring that first of all, Kenyans get from point A to point B when they are safe, and ensuring that the roads were clear, transport was efficient. It was absolutely your ministry. And we have always known that the public transport in this country is not the best. I know there has been a lot of effort being made to try and make it efficient, but somehow it worked. What magic did we pull?
Thanks, Brian. I think before I even comment on what happened to the public transport, there's a question you did ask my colleague Kasuku about what happened the day when it was announced that we have COVID. Until then, most of us, if not all of us, never believed that it would ever come here. It looked to be a myth, a disease which was out there in Wuhan in China, but not in Kenya. But on that day, I still remember very well, because at personal level, the same day when we had this young lady flying from the United States, and was determined when she arrived here to be COVID positive, the same day my daughter was flying from the US. And so obviously it did raise quite a bit of personal anxiety, because that's the first time as a country we are facing COVID. And so at personal level, we had to take precautions, but also now at official level, business level, which is what you are saying, we did determine as government that in terms of transmission of COVID, 90% of it was as a result of public transport. Yeah. In particular, the matatu industry. But even going beyond the matatu industry, we have other subsectors within my ministry. We have the aviation sector, Kenya Airways and all these other airlines. We have the seaports, we had the railway. And so we had to take a fairly quick decision ourselves to make sure that we mitigate now what had come on us. I know one time in cabinet, His Excellency had said this is before it came here. He had said, hii kitu ikituangukia. You know, that time it was not here. But then the fact that now it was here, the reality dawned on us, all of us. And so we took immediate steps in terms of those subsectors. Matatus, we galvanized everybody in terms of the 6 federations of Matatus to make sure protocols were followed from day one. We provided them with the free sanitizers. We visited all the bus stations and so forth. And so a lot of work was done. We directed immediately that for the railway, the SGR would only carry 50% capacity. And of course, globally, aviation sector came to a standstill.
Yeah.
So KQ could not fly and so forth. Even seaports, we had to make sure that we actually took immediate action to avoid now passengers coming with COVID. And I'll explain later in terms of some of the other key infrastructure investments which we did to mitigate the onset of COVID.
Very well. And it's proper. I mean, you're talking about, you know, transport, you're talking about railway, you're talking about sea transport, you're talking about, you know, the public transport. And as a country, we know that almost 90% of our imports and exports, you know, is through seaports. And this is the one area that was completely affected. We'll be coming back to you to discover more. But I want us to appreciate that the CS for Trade, Betty Maina, is finally with us. Good morning, Madam CS, and thank you for finding time to be with us. You're most welcome for this program. And I want to turn to you now and discuss the issues of trade. This time around, you know, when the first case of COVID-19 was reported here in Kenya, I mean, we saw a situation whereby the private sector looked up to government to offer direction, to offer leadership. I want to hear from you as the docket of trade. There was concerns. What will happen, you know, to our exports? What will happen to the issues or to the goods, you know, that were in the high seas? How did all these pan out for your docket, and how did you have everything figured out?
Thank you very much, O'Brien, and good morning, everyone. COVID was a disruptor, and the first impact of COVID in Kenya was actually felt even before we had the first case, because a lot of our supplies comes from outside the country, and a lot of our markets are outside the country. So we already faced shortages of supplies. So fears about shortages of supplies, especially from China. And then we also started to face closure of markets, especially in Europe and the US. So that first quarter was very, very disruptive. But people still, managed to rebound quite quickly. We saw some depressed exports in the beginning, in the first quarter, but by the second quarter, especially for horticulture and food, because the winter season was still, it was still during the winter season, so people still needed to eat, and we tend to feed them. And thanks to the support of colleagues like CS Macharia, who were quickly able to organize the supply chains, especially for exports. China picked up by the end of March, April, so supplies of raw materials also started to come in. There were fewer boats, but we certainly did see a rebound from the second quarter. The business community in Kenya also looked to government to provide guidance and leadership, and that was provided, especially with the guidelines for production and support during COVID time. So even when there were restrictions in the country, there was great attention paid to keeping the supply chains open, and either as essential services or even special passage for goods vehicles to make sure that there was no shortage of goods. So I think there's been a lot of learning, but there's I think for by and large, we've also managed to keep business open as much as possible, especially those in essential services.
One of the issues that we forget quite easily is that, when in most countries around the world, when cases of COVID were reported, there was scarcity of some goods. Like I remember, in the US, there was scarcity of even toiletries. There was scarcity of face masks. There was shortages of PPEs. In Kenya, even when the case was reported, we didn't experience these on a large scale. How did we ensure that we kept our export and import flows, in a seamless manner?
Thank you very much. I think one of the things that with these disrupted supply chains, each country turned to itself for its supply. I don't understand the toilet roll issue. I'm not quite sure why people went and stocked up a lot of toilet rolls. But PPEs and stuff, and essential supplies, medical commodities, countries started to just make them for themselves because, first of all, there was fear of hoarding, because everybody needed it at the same time. But I think that's also one of the, if there was anything we could also use or say to describe this season, is that we have learned our own resilience. We have learned to be innovative because, Kenyans went from not making PPEs, not making masks, to producing prototypes within 3 weeks and getting it approved within 4 weeks, and in mass production by week 6. So we've actually shown we can do these things together.
Very well.
Kenya Airways didn't have a cargo plane, but they turned a passenger plane into cargo planes to keep our exports moving. So we've seen a lot of innovation and a spirit of resilience in the Kenyan business community, which I think is really to be commended.
It's very interesting, that you're talking about, the kind of innovation that we saw then companies, redesigning their production lines and starting production of PPEs as well as sanitizers. And I remember very well when, the Kenya pipeline, they told the nation, look here, it's possible for us to produce sanitizer, at our factories. And these are some of the success stories that we really talk about as a nation. But I'll be coming back to you. But I want now to turn on to Namata. Nairobi is the heartbeat of the region, and so, as the saying goes, when Nairobi coughs, every other part of the region will get a cold. How were you well prepared, or how did you manage to get all stakeholders, on the table and reconfigure, the way we transport or the way we travel from one county to another? You are in charge of how many counties? 5 counties?
5 counties.
5 counties, with a population of almost 12 million people, right?
Yes.
And
10.5 now. Yep.
This would definitely be a logistical nightmare for any city, trying to ensure that people move from point A to point B in the middle of a crisis. How did you manage to pull this one?
O'Brien, as you well know, that the consumption of trips within an urban environment like the city of Nairobi is basically a lot of work-based trips and school-based trips. We had a great blessing right from 2017 by having Namata established through an executive order, and also great commitment by the head top management in the ministry to be able to drive the studies and the implementation plans for bringing about a transformation in the public transport sector. I want to say that we were very lucky because as early as March 2019, the cabinet secretary had already appointed a task force that was actually advising on the transformation. So even when the COVID issue came in 2020, we were lucky that we were already having partnership with the main providers of public transportation, and these were the private sector. Yeah. We had dialogue, we had discussed and brainstormed on a transformation process that could bring about sanity in how people were actually transported around the Nairobi metropolitan area. COVID was a big blow, yes, because some of these protocols required lower capacity, and then that meant, the cost of transport was majorly transferred to the individual commuters. Those were challenges. However, the environment was also favorable because many people did not have to make those trips to work. Many people did not have to make trips to school, and for the people who stayed at home, then made that the demand, the travel demand around the city was very heavily reduced. We know, O'Brien, in Nairobi we are registering almost 90,000 vehicles in a month. The congestion issue is basically more related to the individual motorized, and the impetus to bring people together in a humane, reliable and affordable transport system like a mass rapid transport system. We're talking commuter rail service. We are talking bus rapid transit. It requires a rethinking of the standards. So NAMATA is busy under the table working heavily on having comprehensive transportation standards, be it of the transportation vehicle, be it on the equitable and equal sharing of public transport infrastructure, and then also seeing a transformation that is pragmatic, that is not draining on the resource plans, so that we deliver on an agenda that is not going to be immediate, but by and by will bring a major transformation to the urban space.
Very well.
Transportation, defines even the culture issues around an urban space. Mobility is an enabler that basically supports the economic and social fundamentals of a city like we have in Nairobi.
Well.
And I want to assure you that there is very committed government commitment, and my CS is here in terms of seeing that this transformation becomes a reality. Of course, not being prepared, but the guidance from government in terms of protocols and behavior change around how we consume transportation in Nairobi has made us overcome some of the fears we had that people may not be disciplined, people will be hustling. Imagine forgetting even about NAMATA, talking about Rikoni Bridge, 300,000 people crossing every day. Now having a bridge, you can imagine these are major transformation projects that are happening around public transportation.
Definitely. I mean, we'll be discussing, some of those, major scores, that we made as a country. I want to turn on to engineer. I mean, we have seen, deliberate efforts by the government trying to light up, rural areas, trying to ensure that our schools, they have electricity. And there came a time when people were now being forced to work from home, and these required their gadgets to be powered. This required, people to watch TVs and listen to the media to know what exactly is happening around the world. I want to hear from you. As a sector, I mean, as a ministry, how were you impacted by the COVID?
Thank you, O'Brien. Electricity is a very critical enabler for socio-economic activities in the country, many of them. And as COVID struck, one of our major focus was to ensure that the human resources that drives those initiatives of creating that enabling environment of a reliable and sustained power sector are safe. And therefore, when we came up with a task force, which was multi-sectoral, basically looking at the impact that the COVID might have and the mitigation measures that we need to put in place, we first focused on the human beings to ensure that they are available, because if you do not have those human beings, then you will not be able to sustain the provision of that service, very critical service, which was even more important because when we talk about more production of masks, more production of PPEs, and you very well know that most of those products started being produced here locally. That required electrical power as an enabler. When we talk about hospitals, creating COVID-compliant hospitals, electrical power in its reliable form is very critical to towards success of that. So we focused on sustenance and reliability of electricity overwide in the whole country, appreciating that even the digital technology itself required very reliable power, as most people were also operating from either the home environment or from distant environment from the offices. So the need for reliable and secure electricity became much more due to the COVID. And therefore our task to deliver that service was so important.
Yeah.
And having recognized that fact, we put up a task force of all the parastatals within the government, and we started looking at what challenges are we likely to face, how do we mitigate those challenges, cross-fertilize ourselves with ideas from one parastatal to the other. Because electricity supply is a chain, starting from generation, transmission, distribution, up to the end customer.
Yeah.
And if there is a failure of any one of those critical sections of that supply chain, then you will not have the electricity. So we had to look at that whole supply chain. And fortunately, when goods and services started being transported, that helped to ensure that we have sustained supply of the materials that we need to ensure continuous supply of electrical power.
Good.
So it was a challenge. We learned a lot of lessons.
Yeah.
We prepared for it, and I think so far, so good.
So far,
we may, of course, have challenges here and there. There are several of them.
Yeah.
But in a nutshell, I think we have tried to ensure that the supply is available to Kenyans over and wide.
I mean, one of the most interesting thing is that, I mean, you know, you would expect that because of the fear and, you know, the hulabaroo, you know, that was created around COVID, you would expect that, you know, people, we would have gone into some sort of a power rationing because people are afraid of going to work. We didn't see this. We'll be coming back to find out, I mean, how everything, you know, was connected to ensure that, you know, we had power 24/7 as a nation. We want now to cruise over to the city of Mombasa, where Anboro is standing by with hoteliers there. And one thing is for sure, if there is an industry that has been hardest hit by COVID-19, it's the hotel industry. They had to close down. Number of people have been laid off. And the question is, what is the way forward? Anboro, thank you very much for joining us. I must admit that the weather out there looks absolutely beautiful. Talk to us. What are people saying down there in Mombasa? Anboro, can you hear me?
It is indeed a good morning here in Mombasa. O'Brien Kimani at studio. We're coming live to you from the Flamingo by Pride Inn Resort in Shanzu, Mombasa County. And what we're discussing today is about the events in 2020, because 2020 has been a very hard year. Keeping in mind, we've been having the coronavirus pandemic worldwide. And in the coast region, tourism is the backbone of revenue here. And the industry has really been hit hard. We've seen people lose their jobs. We've seen hotels closed down. Others until to date have not been able to revive themselves and open once again. But all this we will be given a preview by the Kenya Coast Tourism Association Chairman Bwana Victor Shitaka, who will be joining me on set right now, and he's going to give us, and he's just going to paint a picture of how 2020 has been for the tourism industry, because it has been the hardest hit, and Mombasa and the coast region is really having a hard time. But thankfully, right now, at least they're having the 75% bookings from the domestic market and the region. According to him, I have talked to him earlier, he had also alluded that the international tourism is not really going to pick up anytime soon, but that is just a bit of what he's going to explain to us. So I'll be welcoming Bwana Shitaka on set. Karibu sana. Karibu. So initially, I would just want you to paint the 2020 picture, how it has been for the tourism industry, keeping in mind the pandemic that has really hit hard the world and the tourism sector in Kenya.
You know, like if you're talking about tourism in 2020, there was no tourism in 2020. We started 2020 very well, and we expected it to be a bumper year for tourism in the coast. Come the pandemic, almost all the hotels closed down. Remember, they were not asked to close down, as were the restaurants, but the hotels closed down because there's simply no business, nobody coming in. All the staff went home, some on unpaid leave, some on long leave, some separation, and that happened until around September when it opened up. So I can imagine 6, for some other hotels 7, and even others 8 months closed. And people opened up only for Christmas and festive period, which, okay, put it this way, when September, when the president opened up the coast, we started getting people trickling in. SGR were fantastic for the coast. The airlines also gave out fantastic offers. Jumbo Jet came up with flights direct from Eldoret and from Kisumu to Mombasa and into Diani and into Malindi. So that was something exciting to see. But numbers are not there. We would see people coming in, 5%, and I'm talking about the big hotels, 5% during the week, and then going up to 20-30% over the weekends. Okay, it picked up when the government gave out monies to the counties, so now that meetings were being held, so it was more mice. But come now December, yes, towards the festive period, there has been a lot more activities, and I'm not talking about full hotels, because hotels are not full like they used to be. Before, by August, you cannot get bookings into a hotel in December. Now, even today, you can get, in any of the hotels, you can get bookings. So people are doing 70-80% during festive period, which was, it's not what it used to be. 2020 has been a bad year for tourism. And I'm also worried about what is going to happen going forward. You see, our normal source markets are still closed up. You see, so people are not coming in here. We talked about international tourism. We had the Polish charter that came in and it's been coming in for 3 weeks now, once a week until March, bringing in at least 150 guests. But that is basically the only charter that is coming in. Nobody else has committed to coming in. In fact, most of them have been closed. Tour operators, international tour operators, are cancelling and postponing all the time. Next year, we're going to have a campaign period. And of course, there is BBI. So there's going to be all these campaigns. It's not going to be attractive for the international operators. 2022 is an election year. Again, normally, we do not have as much tourism as we would normally have. So, international tourism, we are looking at maybe 2023. So it's got to be domestic. Domestic schools are opening next week. We are happy if children are going to school. Of course, there's cry, are we ready, and so on. So the middle class who have been going to most of the hotels are now thinking about school fees and how to take their kids to school. There isn't much business coming in. It was very good that the government released monies to the counties so that meetings were being held, strategic positioning was being done. Then comes all these issues about workers in different counties not being paid. I am told in some of the counties, in the 6 counties that we, Kenya KCT, look at, some people haven't been paid for months. Yeah. So I can see a lot of money being directed to ensuring continuity of the counties rather than meetings that were being held, which were from September, October going on. I look at it and I'm saying I'm depressed about what's going to happen for tourism. Kenya is a very resilient country, and I'm a very, very positive person. but I see there's going to be a big challenge. I see from January onwards, we are probably going to go back to reduced staff for the hotels that brought in their staff for this particular period. I see, the taxes are back.
Yes.
The incentives that had been given. So the people who are earning 21,000 and below, who are not paying, who are tax exempt, are not going to have to pay tax. And then the people who, the 5% exempt, 30 PUI is coming back. So there's really no money. I'm sad about what's going to happen to tourism. What we are looking at as a tourism fraternity, one, we came up with Destination Coast, because the coast as a destination is magical. So we're going to out there and selling the coast as a destination through KTB and the help of our minister, who has been very helpful. Our Minister Balala is passionate about tourism. But there's so much we can do. We are going to look at going Africa. Regional tourism. That's all. They understand our election. They are African like us. We want to support one another and keep as much of our people at work as possible. But hotels will be doing, maybe you work for a week and then you change. That's what is going to happen. So I'm not looking at a good year. 2020 was terrible. 2021 will be slightly different. I think we will still continue with big problems in the hospitality industry.
What would you say are the biggest lessons you learned as a hospitality industry during this pandemic in 2020?
Don't sit on your laurels. Everybody thought, 2020 was going to be a fantastic year. We expected to pick up from where we have been. We are talking about, 3 million guests coming into Kenya, 5 million and up. But this has changed the dynamics. Who would have thought that meetings now are going to be virtual rather than, one-to-one? So we are looking at things differently. We're saying it's a new norm. We've got to wear a mask. You're a very attractive lady, but I can't quite see your whole face. So it's just totally new. Everybody is still looking at the challenge on what to do to ensure that we just keep afloat. We've learned that we've got to have partnerships with our banks, with our suppliers, so that they can understand what we're going through. And I see going forward, the kind of partnerships that will be formed, the kind of strategic partnerships that will be formed between banks, between hotels, because for KCT and most of the hotels, we are now not selling our own individual hotels. We are selling the destination. And this has brought us together. But like I said, Kenya is a resilient people. Kenyans have always risen up. So there's a little light at the end of a long tunnel.
So what would you say, because you've talked about people will continue losing jobs in the hospitality industry. What exactly would you tell the people who have done hospitality how to go about the whole issue? Because as you know, the coast region really depends on tourism, and when you're talking of tourism being on the downhill, what should they expect?
I have attended meetings and learnt about farming. I've learnt about agriculture. I have learnt recently that the Kenyan coast is fantastic for the growing of chili. We're supposed to be having fantastic soil for the growth of chili. Chili is needed worldwide. We have got to look at alternatives. What else can you do? A lot of people are doing chicken and eggs. Now, who are they going to supply it to? But everybody must eat. So look at farming, look at fishing, look at how do we ensure that in our own local area there is continued food and there is helping each other. But one of the things that I have seen most in most of areas is companionship. I've seen one family help another family. I've seen people coming together to help one another, and that is great for this country.
So financially, what would you say about the whole thing with the corona and come 2020? How has it been for the hotels financially? Because you really have to keep afloat.
Let me talk about the hotel I run. So I run Pride Inn Flamingo. I'm the regional manager of the Coast Group, but I run Pride Inn Flamingo. If you look at revenues this year compared to revenues last year, where for 7 months that we were closed, we did not make any revenue, we are millions away from what we did. You will have heard that we've lost 18 to 20 billion already in the industry in this short period. So we are going to suffer financially. Banks are starting to say, look, okay, we've given you a moratorium for a particular time, but I mean, we've also got to service our own financial obligations. So I don't see money coming in. The country is already in debt, okay? With all these calls by different fraternities. There's a medical, soon the school people will come in and say, look, we need more money. Where is this money coming from? So I'm looking at a financial difficulty in the whole country, and especially the tourism industry.
You've talked about selling Africa, as a domestic market and Africa right now. You're not selling international market. What would you assurance that you're giving to the African market and domestic market when they come to the hotels? Are they safe enough to be in these hotels as we continue fighting this pandemic?
In terms of safety,
yes,
the tourism industry has done everything to ensure safety. The protocols are being followed. And this is all through our country. So, and we are no longer worried about security like we used to before. So Kenya is a secure place. Protocols have been put up. That is why there's a reduction in numbers of people who are getting the disease as reported. Okay? So I can assure you one thing: wherever you go, protocols have been put up, and you, as the client coming in, you've also got to take care of yourself. That's why you're putting on a mask. That's why I'm putting on a mask. I know you, Anne, and I should say, look, I know Anne, so I'm not going to put on a mask. But we've taken the precaution to care for each other, to protect one another. So it lies on you as well. But all the hotels and all the places that you will go to have put in the proper protocols to ensure you're safe.
So what lessons are you carrying from 2020 to 2021?
You have got to be tough. You've got to be resilient. You've got to just keep going and saying, look, this is not working, let us try this other one. This is not working, let us try this. And that's what you've got to do. The lesson is just keep going. There's that thing that people always say, when it gets tough, the tough, keep going. Huh? Yeah. That's so. Yeah, go ahead. Just stick in there and go for it.
As you've heard from the horse's mouth, and the going is tough, you also have to get tough for the hospitality industry. They're having a hard time, but they're coming up with ways to change all this to 2021. As he has said, as Shitaka has alluded, is that in 2023 is when you're going to see the growth in tourism. And that is all we have for you right now in Mombasa. Back to you in studio, O'Brien Kimani.
Well, thank you, Anne Mboro. Your guests there talking about, number one, innovation, number two, diversification, and then number three, re-engineering. For you to remain in business, those three must apply. I would want to hear from you, from the team in the studio, what you make about this gentleman's argument about the future and how they have managed to deal with this. But I want first of all to hear from Dr. James Mwangi. This man is raising a very interesting topic. Come January, people will be dealing with school, going back to schools, and of course, we are likely to see the resumption of the full taxation measures, that were put in place to relieve the suffering of Kenyans. Dr. James, what advice would you be having for the hotel industry and as the banking industry? What kind of support are you ready to offer to the hospitality industry, which is one of the hardest hit by the pandemic?
Thank you very much. I think he told it as it is. And for the first time, both as a business community, as a country, and as a community, we have to work together. This was a pandemic initiated crisis that quickly became an economic crisis affecting everybody. And until the root cause is solved, we would have a lasting solution. And anything we take other than where we repurpose our factories, we repurpose our hotels, we repurpose our businesses, it will simply be cosmetic. Banks must strengthen their capability and resilience to support particularly the borrowers, because as it was well articulated, the cash flows has dried out, and borrowers pay loans from cash flows. So banks must really be able to take a long-term view of accommodating their clients. Banks have to deal with the challenge of cash flow disruption. They must protect their capital. They must protect their liquidity. So it's a huge challenge. But I think working together, government coming in, international community, international financial system, then the financial sector will play the pivotal role of stabilizing the entire industry. If the financial sector acts irresponsibly, then what we will have is systemic failure of business that eventually will crash on the balance sheet of banks, and which may not have the capacity to bear. So there must be patience and resilience. However, business must turn to be very innovative. We must find new green shoots that we can feed on. We must repurpose our businesses. We must be innovative and creative. And we must really see the signals from the marketplace as far as the reallocation of resources, the reallocation of consumption is concerned. So we reinvent ourselves. Businesses that are not able to reinvent themselves will really find it challenging because there is a market shift and it's a systemic shift. So we all must study it, we must align with it and move with it. But the banking industry, we at Equity Bank have committed to accommodate our clients up to 3-4 years. We must really work with them. And until the cash flow starts playing in, like now it's only in March that we shall be calling on the schools to start servicing their loans after they have got school fees for 1 month, for 1 quarter, and maybe serviced outstanding obligations. Then during the second half of the year, they could be able to start servicing their loan. That accommodation is what is necessary. And this accommodation must be a moratorium of both the principal plus interest because of lack of cash flows.
Very well. I'll come back to you on the issue of repayment of loans and of accumulation of interest, which of course the business community is raising concern. But thank you for your interjections there. I want to hear from you, Bonasiers. I know now, the SGI is back on track. People are moving from Nairobi to Mombasa. I know now the airspace are open. Flights are coming in and out. Just the other day we saw, a Polish flight, coming from Poland, which was chartered flights, which was absolutely, some relieving news. Apart from this, what else do you think can be done to support the tourism industry at the coast, which is almost 80% reliant on tourism?
Yeah, thanks, O'Brien. I think one of the fundamental issues which I can mention, and the gentleman from the coast, I think he did mention that, is about certain subsectors collaborating among themselves. Because when we have such extreme difficulties, we would have some very, very robust collaboration for any of the sectors to survive. I'm glad to hear Dr. Mwangi Aki saying about how they are working to support their clients who not necessarily in the tourism sector, but also broadly in terms of business. And this is a collaboration which you actually help countries, not just businesses, manage through this, these challenges which we are facing. If we do not have collaboration among all sectors, people will realize very shortly that no single business operates in a vacuum. And so, coming down to the transport sector, the tourism sector, I must say we've been having actually very, very robust discussions with my counterpart, CS Balala, to see how we can create a service chain where, say, for example, the SGR is carrying tourists, either international or local, but with one package. whereby they get to Mombasa, for example, and the hotels there are part of the package. We're even actually discussing how we shall have dedicated trains, some of them economy, some of them business class, where these tourists, you know, that they are paying, you know, at one point, but they have a service across the entire, you know, service chain, all the way from the airport, you know, going to SGR, going to the hotel, and even within Mombasa, the kind of services which are provided within the coast. That is the way these small businesses which are in this tourism sector are going to survive. Let me also say that countries which have been faced with this kind of situations, even before COVID, you can see how successful they became because they learned to be innovative, they learned to be resilient, and because of that, they developed their own inbuilt capability to survive turbulent times. And you can mention a few. You remember even South Africa when there was apartheid. They were left to do things on their own. And that's how the economy of South Africa actually did develop the way it developed. Look at a country like Israel, for example. The same thing. They developed in-house and inbuilt, you know, intra-country capability. This is what managed to bring Israel where it is today. You know, where you find the best farming in the desert, for example. This is what we like to encourage all business sectors. And we, as government, our role is to facilitate, to make sure that indeed they are given all the support they require. And coming down even to some of the subsectors which we have, like say the aviation sector. KQ, you know, after all the flights were terminated, you know, the passenger planes, you know, like Betty said, my colleague Betty Minor, we had to find a way of making sure that they continue generating revenue. We converted some 787s, which previously were carrying passengers, to start carrying cargo, starting carrying flowers. And through that chain, we were supporting now the flower farmers in Naivasha and other places. And as a result, the country was getting foreign exchange coming to this country. As a result of that, KQ was getting revenues because the 787 in the belly, it can carry up to 40 tons of cargo. That way, it helped the airline to keep on running. So what I'm saying in short is the message is about collaboration and making sure that we work in sync, whether it is banking sector, tourism sector, transport sector, making sure that we all work together to add value, but also minimize the costs, because this is how it will make us competitive, you know, globally.
Very well. You know, you're talking about collaborations, and I want to bring on board, you know, the CS for Trade and Industrialization, Betty Minor. You know, Waziri is talking about, you know, collaborations, you know, between, you know, what I would call, you know, multi-sectoral collaborations. And, you know, as a CS for Trade, I mean, you're expected to give guidance, you know, to small businesses on how to we go out of this kind of a crisis. I know this is unprecedented, but we would want to hear from you. What kind of guidance or what I would call boost are we expecting to see, you know, going forward being offered to the struggling small businesses in a bid to keep them afloat?
A lot of collaboration in different business sectors. The government itself has made available some resources to support small businesses with the credit guarantee scheme, which the banks have signed on to, and that's 100 billion shillings of credit guarantee that will be mobilized from both the private sector and government. But in addition to that, with support from external parties, the banks, and James can confirm that both KCB, Equity, and a lot of the banks have also extended some credit guarantee to their small businesses. I know there is a partnership with the Kenya Chamber of Commerce and with Equity, and with support from the MasterCard Foundation. So the idea is to make sure that you're supporting the businesses that are ongoing, so that they can have cash flow. So these sort of collaborations make a difference. We've also seen collaborations between those engaged in retail and e-commerce, and also with our small business like Borders. Many people during the times of restrictions couldn't go to the market, but an alliance between Mama Bogas and the market women with Borders ensured that people could get their supplies. And these are not things that were stimulated by government, they were also stimulated by business. Actually, the rise of e-commerce and delivery services made it possible for many businesses to run and to service their customers, and a lot of this to continue being called being brought to, being expected of us. And I think the innovations that we are discussing, for instance, between the hospitality and the transport sector, would make it possible to see some businesses. Obviously some businesses have been very negatively affected, but the ones who are willing to innovate and get into these partnerships have also seen some growth. So government doesn't stand in the way of any innovations, and businesses are really free to innovate. But on its own side, government has created the framework for liquidity and support to businesses through, like I mentioned, the credit guarantee scheme, the Kazi kwa Vijana program, the Kazi Mtaani, has also been part of support to ensure that there is this effective demand for goods, because once you employ these people, they're going to buy goods and services from other businesses. Thirdly, I've also seen great innovation in Kenya, and many Kenyans have started to plant. Basically go into agriculture, plant own food, so they don't have to go to the market to supply. And those who haven't can benefit from those who have planted. And fortunately, we had good rains this year, and we've had good supplies of food, and that will continue. So I think we will be calling upon all our business people to work in a very, very collaborative manner to service each other as we go through. This is just one crisis we've gone through this year. We do not know what next year holds, but certainly the spirit of resilience and the spirit of innovation will tide many businesses over.
To find out, what kind of innovations, what kind of collaborations, you're expecting to see, as the year 2021 progresses. But I want to come back to Sylvester here. We were discussing, the progress of LAPSET, a mega project, by all standards. I was there in September, and I'm, it made me appreciate, the level of development that is taking place, around, Lamu. One question that, still baffles me is, there was terror attack in Lamu, sometimes in January. Then there came, COVID with its sets of challenges. But still, you got there, you see a lot of, progress being made, to ensure that the ports and the baths, are ready for business. How have you managed, to pull these one, in the midst of this pandemic and the terror crisis?
Thank you very much, O'Brien. First and foremost, let me make it very clear that the government is very focused in terms of delivering on strategic investments in the country, the COVID pandemic notwithstanding. We know that the times ahead, revenues are diminishing, but there is a very strong focus by the government to deliver on strategic investments, as I've already said. Number two is that, yes, you mentioned, you've talked about the attack that happened in Lamu, but we all know that terrorism is a global phenomenon, and as such, this is not the first time that we could have witnessed such an attack within our own land. And the government, again, as I've already said before, has all the necessary machinery, has the necessary human capital, has the necessary resources within the security sector to ensure that the country doesn't get a shock when such a situation arises. And as such, a lot of effort has been made, and I would like to say that the situation was stabilized very fast, and that enabled work to continue. At the same time, looking at the Lamu economy, there is one thing that we do see the project side, but again, we haven't seen or we haven't talked much about the impacts that have arisen since the LAPSET corridor program started implementation all the way back in 2012. If you went to Lamu at that particular time, in terms of flights, there were only 3 flights in a week. I'm saying 3 flights in a week, not in a day. 3 flights in a week. Today, you have over 5 flights in a day.
In a day.
You can make a trip to Lamu and come back by evening. And in fact, the airline industry actually increased the number of flights during this particular festive season. And Kenyans, among many other people who are interested in tourism, have actually filled Lamu. And business is booming in Lamu. If you look at retail business in Lamu, it has expanded exponentially beyond imaginations. In the early days, when we first started the project, if you went to Lamu by 6 p.m., you would find the streets are empty. By 7 going to 8, you wouldn't spot anybody. Today, Lamu is abuzz with business, even up to 10 o'clock at night. And many other local, local-based businesses like fishing and selling of fisheries is booming and supplying and supporting many other parts of the country. You find large cooling vessels docked in Lamu waiting for fishermen to bring their catch of the day. And you find a lot of transportation systems ferrying that to Mombasa, among many other areas. So we are saying that these are very key investments that are being spearheaded by government. And as such, making sure that they continue, making sure that they are delivered on time, making sure that the impacts are not interrupted is indeed part of building the resilience within the economy. I would also like to point out that whereas the COVID issue, the COVID pandemic has created shocks in many other sectors of the economy, there are other sectors that have actually gained out of this, or there is building resilience within our economy has enabled us maybe to enable other sectors to take a leading role in sustaining the economy. For example, the ICT sector, we've seen that meetings are today e-based. I mean, they're online.
They're being held virtually.
Yeah.
We're actually doing it right now.
They are virtual. And including whether you're talking about board meetings, you're talking about meetings of government, you are talking about international meetings. We held a UN meeting on urbanization and development in Africa. And it was a global meeting, it was virtual. It could have been physical if there was no COVID. And we've seen that this has actually enabled our youth to actually, the youth is actually seizing the moment to even fast-track adaptation and improving their creativity on matters ICT. It has already been mentioned by CS Betty Maina about farming. I've seen many teachers, many people who are not going to work actually venturing into farming. A lot of the population has actually enabled the economy to pick up, to build resilience within the economy. The industries are now producing what we never used to produce. And going forward, definitely we are seeing the government continuing with the investment in infrastructure, which is actually going to create a stronger enabling environment for us to pick up from where we are today. Taking note of the fact that infrastructure is not built unto its own self, as was already said by the CS and the PS, before.
For energy.
Yes. The infrastructure is built as an enabler. And the more we are doing today, you've seen the expressway, we are going to see better urban mobility taking place. We are going to see opening up of other parts of the country which were previously inaccessible. The first tarmac road is now being completed in Lamu, connecting Lamu with the B8, the road that comes from Mombasa through Malindi and goes to Garissa. We are also seeing, I know the CS, maybe we'll talk about it. There is the road that connects Lamu directly to Garissa is also going to be up when its opening for motorization commences.
Yeah.
And we are opening up new frontiers of economic growth and development going forward. And this is what is actually going to enable us to pick up
very well,
much better.
Mm-hmm. So I'll be coming back to you with some of the projects, that are lined up. I know it's a whole area altogether, trying to open up, the unopened parts of Kenya. But I want to hear from PS Njoroge. Before we go to Kipnusu, who is in City Center, quickly let us know. I mean, we expect schools to be all the schools now to be reopened in January. Do we expect to see a situation whereby now all the public schools are now connected to the national grid?
Thank you, O'Brien. Yes, indeed. You remember I said that the momentum that we have built since 2013 has been of great facilitative agent of making us go through this COVID challenge. And that momentum, which brought in digital technology, made a big heap of contribution towards electrification of most of the schools. The schools which are within the grid area, I would say fairly more than 95% are already electrified. The schools that are outside the grid area, about 90% are also electrified through off-grid solutions, which makes it possible for most of the students to enjoy digital literacy. And if you remember, that was one of the main initiative in the manifesto of Jubilee. Of course, nobody knew that COVID would come, but this digital literacy program has really made a huge contribution towards creating an enabling environment for the students, even in the midst of this COVID. And that momentum, which we built up, still has created capacity to continue delivering on electrification. From 2013, we have more than tripled the number of customers connected to the grid. There were 2.3 million at that time. We are now at about 7.7 million. So you see, that is more than tripling the number. Last year, we still managed, even in the midst of the challenge, we still managed to connect more than 500,000
this
customers.
Year, you mean?
Yeah, so this year.
Yeah.
And we look forward to connecting
more people
a similar number
in 2021.
In 2021.
Very well.
So we have not fallen off our target. We have not fallen off our track of creating access to as many customers as possible. And access was conceptualized in the Vision 2030 when it was brought on board. Because when we talk about making Kenya a middle income industrializing nation, so that it offers good quality of life to its citizens, you cannot be a middle income without significant consumption of energy. Indeed, there is a correlation between energy consumption and the GDP. Most of the advanced countries, what we call those countries which enjoy developed status, they are at the high end of energy consumption. The countries that are at the growing stages are at the low end. So as we contemplate towards getting the status of our dream of Vision 2030, energy consumption will be stepped up, and therefore the obvious thing is we must ensure everybody is electrified.
Very well.
That's why we revised the dream of creating access from 2030 to 2022. We made sure that we want to get electrification status achieved earlier than industrialization, because it's a chicken and egg situation. One leads to the other. So if you want to get more industries on board, you must make sure that power is available all over. So in terms of access, we still continued to build on the momentum that we had in 2013. That will make electricity available to as many customers as is possible.
Very good. We want to go to the streets of Nairobi. I'll be coming back to you, Engineer Gitau, because I know there is a serious intermodal transport system that is being developed in Nairobi. But we first of all want to hear the people of Nairobi, where our reporter Timothy Kipnusu is on standby with Nairobians actually there. And we want now to hear from them what questions and concerns they may be having for the year 2020 and of course going forward. Timothy Kipnusu, if you can hear me, what are the people out there in the streets saying?
A very good morning to you, O'Brien Kimani, there at the broadcasting house. Yes, indeed. I'm coming to you live from Nairobi Central Business District, Kenya National Archives to be particular, just to have a feel from Kenyans how the year 2020 has been amidst the pandemic, and of course to understand what is their expectation from the year 2021 as they plan to read from a blank page of a book containing 365 days. What are their expectations? Also bearing in mind that school reopening will begin next week on 4th. Are they prepared to take their kids to school, or have they been affected by the COVID-19? Joining me is one gentleman. Many thanks indeed for joining us. Just come closer here. How has been the year 2020 for you, bearing in mind that the country is being actually affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, which struck the country early March?
I'm okay. My name is Abena Dundiek. I want to say that it has been a struggle, and you see there are a lot of things we expect in the new year. The recovery channel will be tough, but a little bit we appreciate because of the kind of the joint political venture, so that there's no much criticism that may come to affect the economy, sort of. So if the politicians can come and join the efforts to recover the economy, it will be better off for us to give a leeway for an easy time. Then again, I want to say that we are expecting the BBI to pass, so that this thing of electoral malpractice, electoral foul plays and all this ends, so that every Kenyan feels put on board and everything moves smoothly on this channel of recovery.
We have the CS for Transport, James Mashari, and of course we also have Sylvester Kasuko, the Managing Director of LAPSET. What is your question to them in ensuring that as we usher in the year 2021, we have a stable economy?
What we need from them is purely service delivery and accountability. If all this shall be taken care of, particularly with the new transport system coming in place, it will be a done deal. Yeah.
And perhaps also, are you a parent, babe? And if you're a parent, how you prepared yourself for the year 2021? Do you have fees for the kids? And perhaps also the message to the Ministry of Education?
I might have fee for myself, but it's not everybody. The idea is that everybody has been always been reminded of this, and we need not to give hard time to the education sector, the ministry, but at least we need to get a middle ground for each other, so that we can move together. Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. Perhaps also can get a lady for the purposes of gender equality. Asante sana madam kwa kujiunga nasi, karibu tu hapa. Hali imekuwa vipi wakati huu ambapo tunapambana na janga la corona, na fahamu fika kwamba wewe ni mwanabiashara hapa katika jiji la Nairobi?
Mimi ni mwanabiashara, na kusema ukweli hii ugonjwa wa corona imetuadhiri. Kama wakati huu tunaporudisha watoto shuleni tutafinyika kwa wingi.
Wito wako pengine kwa Waziri Macharia ambaye ako kwa sasa kwenye stesheni zetu kuhusiana na kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba uchumi wa taifa hili umeweza kuimarishwa na kuhusiana vile vile na sekta ya uchukuzi?
Ambapo kama wakati huu kama mimi mzazi tunang'ang'ana vile tunaweza pata school fees ya watoto. Kama mtoto kama saa hizi alikuwa anavaa kiatu 23, atavaa kiatu kama 27 ama 24.
Pengine we can also get what to see in the entertainment world. I'm joined by one gentleman who is a DJ, and of course, as you're all aware, Brian, when you are ushering in the new year 2021, we normally have a lot of merrymaking, and I think this year will be a different one altogether because we have the curfew in place, and therefore the liquor outlets and of course the nightclubs and the concerts will not be there just to usher in the new year. Asante sana kwa kuweza kuzungumza nasi kwenye KBC channel. Unaitwa nani na pengine mwaka huu umekuwa vipi na matarajio yako mwaka 2021 na kuhusiana na kupambana na janga la COVID-19, hali imekuwaje?
So my name is Kennedy Martin, and I'm a DJ. Personally, the year has been rough for us as the entertainment industry because like it's been 3/4 of the year has gone without us having any shows or going to work, and not only the entertainment industry has been affected, also the staffs who work at the club have also been affected. So we are hoping that before the end of the year, as we usher in the coming year, that been really struggling, and it's never been easy for any one of us, so hopefully everything will be well. So yeah.
Perhaps also, what is your call to the government in terms of the issue of employment of the youth, because we are aware that many youth do not have jobs right now. You observe, you're taking initiative of being a DJ. What's your call to the government for the youth?
My call to the government is that they should be the same, because the times are moving right now and people are competing with other countries, so we don't want to be left out. So if the government can ensure youth are getting more opportunities, it will be well for us.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Maybe you can allow me one gentleman who has been standing here to give his comment about how he has experienced the year 2020 rather amidst the pandemic. A gentleman, just come closer here. Asante sana kujiunga nasi. Mambo yamekuwa vipi mwaka huu 2020 wakati ambapo taifa linapambana na janga la COVID-19? Unafanya biashara, umeathirika?
Mimi naitwa Harrison Jenga, na kwa upande wangu mwaka hii nimekuwa nikijaribu kufanya kazi, lakini imekuwa haina matunda mzuri kabisa. Kwa hivyo biashara yetu iko chini sana. Kwa hivyo kwa upande ya biashara mimi nimeathirika zaidi kabisa.
Zungumzia kuhusiana na kuweza kuwapiga jeki, kuwapa mkopo na masuala kama upegero. Unafahamu kwamba kuna ajenda kama hiyo kutoka kwa serikali, na pengine ikiwa bado wito wako ni upi kuhusiana na swala hilo la kuweza kuwapiga jeki kupitia mikopo?
Sina mkopo mahali nimepata kutokana na upande wa serikali.
Kila laheri katika biashara yako. Asante sana kwa kuzungumza nasi. Mtu mmoja pengine aweze kuzungumza nasi. Karibu sana ndugu. Unaitwa nani na unafanya nini hapa katika jiji la Nairobi? Hali imekuwa vipi?
Kwa majina naitwa Daniel Ongera.
Unaweza uweze kujikinga?
Kwa majina naitwa Daniel Ongera. Ambassador. Sasa kwa hii mwaka COVID-19 imekuwa shida sana kwa hii biashara yetu. Customers hawapo tangu hii corona ianze, imekuwa na shida ngumu sana.
Pengine wito wako kwa serikali kuhusiana na watu wa kawaida waweza kuhakikisha kwamba wanaimarika masuala ya ajira na usalama wa chakula na masuala kama kuhakikisha kwamba vijana wameweza kwa mstari wa mbele kuweza kupambana na hacha.
Sasa rudia swali.
Wito wako kwa serikali ni ipi wakati huu ambapo tunazungumzia kuhusiana hakuna ajira, wakati ambapo tunazungumzia vile vile kuna ile mchakato wa kufanyia katiba marekebisho? Unaona kwamba ni masuala tunaweza kuangazia kwa sasa ni job, BBI au tuangazie uchumi wa taifa?
Mimi kulingana na mimi BBI ningesema haingekuwa, kwa sababu ya hii mwaka umekuwa mwaka ngumu sana. Serikali ingeangalia kwanza mambo ya uchumi, ile kabisa mambo ya uchumi kwanza, ndio watu wapate chakula. Sasa hii mambo ya BBI imechanganya mambo mingi.
Asante sana. There you have it, O'Brien Kimani. That is sentiments from a number of Kenyans here in Nairobi Central Business District. Many of them actually indicating that they are going through rough time at the moment. We are having this COVID-19 pandemic, and they are telling us that the economy has been done, and they are calling upon the country to focus on ensuring that we have a stable economy. And of course, also there's some who have been talking about the Building Bridges initiative, and they are saying it is time yet to do the changes in the constitution, but others are actually having a different opinion altogether. Remember, this year also we have undergone a number of things, having a number of calamities and tragedies. Early this year on February, before even the COVID-19 pandemic, we lost a man who ruled 24 years with an iron fist, the second president of the Republic of Kenya, Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. Later on, the people in the spiritual world also lost Ndingi Mwananzeki, the Catholic Archbishop, who lost also his life, and we also have 4 legislators who died this year. That include Msambweni, Member of Parliament, Suleiman Dori. We also have Justice Murunga, the Member of Parliament from Matungu, James Lusweti of Kabuchai, Machakos Senator Boniface Mutinda Kabaka. We also have one governor recently actually dying. That's the governor of Nyamira.
Well, Timothy, thank you very much indeed. And the sentiments that you are hearing in the streets of Nairobi, about tough times, these are the sentiments the world over. But one thing is for sure, tough times do not last. Tough people do last. And it's a question of creating positive hope around the future. And of course, that's why we are here, asking ourselves, how do we make the year 2021 a better year, not only for us as a community, but for the world at large? Those are the issues that we are discussing here. We have learned our lessons in 2020, and the question is, how do we use the lessons learned to improve the years ahead, the year 2021, 2022, 2025 or 2030 altogether? This is a discussion we are having here. We are in the hands of able gentlemen and women. Of course, we're discussing the year 2020, the challenges that we faced, the opportunities, the year 2021, what it portends for the nation. You have heard it all from these people in the studio, and of course, those are virtual. And now I want to turn to the man who is in charge of, or whose task of ensuring that there is a comprehensive mobility system in the greater Nairobi County. And the Nairobi Metropolitan actually consists of about 5 counties: Murang'a, Machakos, Kajiado, Nairobi itself, Kiambu, and Murang'a. I thought I mentioned Murang'a somewhere. And so the task of ensuring that there is seamless interconnectivity in terms of transport, this is the work of not only the national government, but of course, the Namata. The engineer in charge of Namata is here with us. Tell me this, when you walk around Nairobi, and in surrounding areas, you see various projects that are coming up, from the expressway to the bus rapid transport system to the commuter rail system, which is now vibrant, and of course we have also seen the train to Nanyuki. All these projects, once they come into fruition, we are expecting 2021 will definitely be proper in terms of movement. How will they impact the way we move from point A to point B?
O'Brien, thank you very much for that question. I had my brother in the city mention a lot of losses. We pray they rest in eternal peace. The corona year has brought shockwaves in all spheres of our lives. Yes, mobility within the city is consumed through various modes. Many of our people are walking, over 40%. Many people are using paratransit, matatu and buses, 40%. The people who are individually motorized, 9 to 15%, going to now maybe stabilizing at 13.4%. So you can see almost everybody in the city is a walking person. So if you look around the city, you can see high quality non-motorized transport infrastructure that is coming up. As our CS talked about collaborative leadership and institutional synergy, you'll see that the mobility plan, which is the map of how people consume travel within the metropolitan area, is going to be serviced through that multi-pronged approach you've talked about. Commuter rail service, a projection of an improvement from a few thousand users to 33,000 users. Now, in fact, the reports you're getting, the commuter rail service is having an excess of 50,000 users in a day. Mm-hmm. You can imagine the rail line alone in the morning is bringing in over 6,000 people.
6,000?
6,000. Mm-hmm. Suppose looking at the studies that were done in 2010, talking about 3 million trips into the city. If we revamp our public transport sector and transform it, and maybe even just save 10 shillings per that trip, that is 30 million Kenya shillings per day, is 1 billion shillings per year. If it is 100 shillings saved, it's 10 billion. So you can see, even as our people speak about issues, household income, you can hear everybody's talking about household income. How people are transported within an urban environment is an indicator of the quality of life of those people. Mm-hmm. In fact, the most civilized societies treat the lowest of their people with high esteem and with quality service. And I think as we move forward with a comprehensive mass rapid transit system that has an optimal integration, and having developed a clear, maybe fair policy, and put in a service quality index, like a promissory note, that this is how I promise you travel from Umoja to the city. This is my promise. This is how you travel from Machakos to the city. Then we'll be talking about a value proposition to the public. And this is where we are moving towards as we develop the mass rapid transit system. Why integration? Integration, optimize public investment so that there is no wastage. Mm-hmm. Again, also utilize existing infrastructure, like the commuter infrastructure that already exists, and maximize on it. You've talked about the Nanyuki line. I think one of these days you'll be able to travel to Nanyuki is quite comfortable line.
I'm looking forward for that, actually. One
thing people talk about, they say legacy projects. But as we move on, me and Kimani, maybe I saw you somewhere taking a photo with KICC when you were young. This will be heritage infrastructure, whereby our youth will be proud to take a photo against an expressway that is a first in the region. We'll be proud to take a photo on a mass rapid transit system where we have things like sanitization booths as a new standard into the safety and security of the commuters. So I think we are looking forward to a healthy, vibrant future.
Yeah. I think, Kenyans, I think they need to understand this in the broader context. What we did do is until 2017, we were focusing very much on the intercity transport system. That's why, if you recall, we launched Madaraka Express on the 1st of June. And this was the first major project of this nature after 122 years. That railway had been done way back in 1895. So after doing the Nairobi, which was called phase 1, from Mombasa to Nairobi, and then now from Nairobi to Suswa, and then having now also these highways being done by Kenha across the country, we realized that by doing intercity, yes, it will have a very big impact, but also you must focus on the intracity. Because what's the point of bringing people from Mombasa to Nairobi? And then they cannot go, now move around within Nairobi. That's why we had to complement the SGR, the intercity SGR, with now the intracity commuter rail. And that's how this concept came about. When we said the two are complementary. That's why as we are doing this commuter rail from the Nairobi railway station, one of the key stops is SGR terminus in Syokimau, to make sure that that connectivity between the commuter rail and the SGR is there, number one. Number two, also the connectivity between the rail system and the aviation sector. And that's why one of the recent commissioning which was done was to put now the railway system, commuter system, together with the BRT to take not just the railway passengers, but also the airline passengers. So today you can actually take a train from the railway station here, you go to Ebakasi village, and then from there you get the BRT, which takes you right into the terminal, into JKA. So I think that concept really truly requires to be understood. And you see also, O'Brien, there's no country globally which ever had any development without a robust public transport system. You go to London, you know, you got the British Rail, which is intercity, but then you got also London Transport through the tube system. So the two are interlinked. You land in a place called King's Cross, then you got into British Rail. So this is what we are trying to do. And I think through Namata, this dream will be realized. Secondly, I think people have to also realize that you cannot manage Nairobi on its own. That's why Engineer Gitao is saying, look, as we look at what we are doing in the city of Nairobi, you must look at the bedrooms, as we call them, the bedrooms of the city of Nairobi. And those are the other 4 counties which you mentioned. Because during the day, we have estimated we have 7 million people working here or living here.
During the daytime? During
the daytime. At night, it goes down to about 4 million, which means you have to find a transport system which is getting these people out of the city of Nairobi. And that's why it was so important that now we have Namata, we have NMS, and we have these other agencies working together to provide a total solution to Kenyans. Yes.
Very well, thank you for that insight. But I want to cross over now to Dr. James Mwangi. James, you have had, you know, the cries of Kenyans in the street, you know, yes, talking about, you know, how business has been low and how they do not have money in their pockets. And, you know, a broke Kenyan is an angry Kenyan. That's what we say in the streets. As a banking industry, what other measures can you put in place to ensure that, you know, Kenyans in the streets and those who are in business and they are struggling, you know, can, number one, get their business to be liquid enough, and number two, they have money in their pockets, you know, to spend by offering them, you know, low interest rates loans, and of course, you know, facilities that are that they can manage, you know, for a bit of long time.
O'Brien, the banking industry have been very, very responsive. First, it chose with the guidance of central bank to stick to the interest capping rates. So the maximum interest rates from the banking industry to date are still 13% that existed during the interest capping period. This was purely to accommodate Kenyans. The second one was the waiver of mobile fees. And if you look for a bank like Equity Bank, that accounts to about 150 million shillings every month that is waived for customers to accommodate them. So if you look at the entire industry, that might be closing maybe close to between 600 million to $1 billion shillings every month. And that, I would say, is consumable income that the banking industry is delivering to the citizens. And then if you look at the accommodation, the banking industry has accommodated up to 40% of all our borrowers during this very, very difficult period. At Equity Bank, we have accommodated up to 45%, giving them a breathing space, giving them time to adjust to their businesses, and maybe for coronavirus pandemic to be resolved. So that level of accommodation has played very, very heavily. And lastly, the banking industry has gone out of its way to reach out to the communities and provide the solution to communities. If you look, most of the banks, including Equity, we are screening temperatures in the banking halls. And so we are constantly reminding people this is a COVID environment. And again, where there are early signs of infection, that the people are advised to seek medical attention and to isolate until it's identified. So because we handle huge numbers of customers, and we have used that advantage to support government executing the health protocols. But it is the state of the banking industry. I think if I can talk specifically of Equity Bank Group, we have dedicated together with our partners 1.7 billion shillings to support the fight against the COVID virus. 300 million has gone to Wings to Fly Kids to give them a monthly bed to survive, to provide them with a solar panel, a charger, a radio, so that we could bridge for them the digital divide. They can remain in school, they can access their lessons through either radio or the mobile phone, and then sustain them and their families, because we support them because of their humble background. But beyond there, it's where the banks, and I'm really glad at the COVID response fund that we have about 3 or 4 bankers on the board. You could almost see the collaboration of rivals to solve our society's problem. And Equity Bank has been able to put 1.4 billion shillings to support PPEs for the frontline medical doctors for all the health facilities, 58 hospitals that have been dedicated. And I'm glad to say we've been able to provide the PPEs up to now, and we still have money to provide those PPEs for another 1 year. So essentially, you can see banks rising up. And eventually what has happened is the banks are affected as the Kenyans. And we could see, for instance, Equity Bank, as at 30th September, our profitability was down 18%. And if you look, the NPLs for the banking industry have risen to an average above 13, one of the highest rates maybe in the last 10 years. And essentially, this is accommodation. And you can see the banks have chosen not to be the cause of a systemic crisis. They have decided this problem should be solved jointly with everybody. It's collaboration, it's partnership. And lastly, it's collaboration, as Betty said, CS Betty said, the government and the private sector, we have set up a guarantee fund to accommodate the SMEs. The government of Kenya and Equity Bank have set together with MasterCard Foundation, we have set to support 200,000 SMEs to create 5 million jobs within the next 5 years in the country. So this process of innovative collaboration and partnership is what will really get us out of here. But I think time has come for us not just to look upon the government. The government has done a lot. We've seen what the tax reforms and rebates that it has given. We've seen the programs like Kazi Mitaani, just to ensure the youth that are occupied, that youth have livelihoods. So essentially, everybody is doing their part. And I think I want to appeal to every Kenyan to recognize and realize they have a contribution to make. As they expect others to play a contribution, each of us must play a contribution. And the most effective contribution will be innovative ways of reinventing ourselves. We have to repurpose if it is our businesses. We must rethink where the economy is going. We must rethink how the markets are reallocating resources and align ourselves to the new economic development. And lastly, banks have jumped in, and I'm glad that Equity has been recognized for Business for Peace Award this year. But we have also joined the international community calling for purpose first. We're saying, yes, let's not rebuild the world the way it was. Let's build afresh. Let's build better. Let's create a resilient world, and let's create a more even equitable world. And banks have played a very, very big role, and I'm proud that Equity has been a signatory to the global rallying call of building better.
Very well. Thank you, James. I mean, in your putting it, correctly there, that each and every one of us, has a role to play to ensure that we rise above the current crisis. And this is why I want to bring in, the CS for Trade, Betty Maina. In June of this year, the Central Bank of Kenya released some very scary data, where they were saying that almost 70% of small businesses, were facing collapse because of liquidity crisis. As a ministry, as government, how have you managed to come through for these, and what interventionary measures, are we likely to see, going forward in the year 2021 to ensure that we alleviate or we lessen the suffering of small SME, of small businesses who are likely to be hit hard by the ongoing crisis?
Thanks. First, two things. Many businesses have suffered. I mean, I think we've acknowledged that it's been a very, very challenging year. But the things that James has just been talking about, Dr. Mwangi, are actually joint initiatives of government and the private sector. The credit guarantee scheme is really intended at targeting support to SMEs. The support work that we do with the micro and small enterprises authority is supporting businesses. The Kenya Youth Enterprise on Opportunities Program, KYOP, has trained many young people and even lent them money. I mean, it's not a lot of money, but 40,000 goes a long way in supporting a lot of these small businesses. But there isn't enough money in the world to go around for every business. So I think the question is each financing institution, be it a government institution like KYOP itself or even the Kenya Industrial Estates, will make a judgment call based on the business that presents itself to it. And I think my message to us and to all businesses is to actually step in and walk into these banks, into these financial institutions, and make your business case. Money will not find us at home. Money will not find us if we are not in an organized group, because it is very difficult to, first of all, identify those needs and until people come forth. So I think the point to make is, for the little that has been made available, the organizations that are the mediators, the intermediators, even if it is something like the Chamber of Commerce, will make a judgment call on the nature of the business that has presented itself. And we will be able to, they will be able to extend the support in the manner that is anticipated. But I think we also need to be clear that the fact that we've had a tough year means that even government itself has had a tough year. Mm-hmm. The fact that government gave tax rebates at the beginning to help people, cushion people, mm-hmm. The lifting of the income tax bans the moratoriums that were given on loans meant that also government did not collect as much money. And the fact that the business was a bit depressed meant that government did not collect as much money. So I think the issue is that we're trying to use the money that we have as clearly and as wisely as possible to support the ongoing initiatives that enable people to produce. When you have infrastructure, for instance, the roads program has continued, electricity program has continued. The person who was far from a road or who did not have electricity can now have access to that electricity for their business. So I think we need to look at the way government has spent its money, especially around infrastructure and all these support programs, means that those who are able to can continue with their production activities. And I think really what the banks have done this year has been very, very commendable. But for those people in the streets who are, and we acknowledge that money did not reach everybody or hasn't reached everybody, it's helpful that as we look into 2021, that they also get into organized groups, young people's groups, and make and approach the financing institutions for consideration of the proposals that they come with.
Mm-hmm. Very well. Thank you for that. One issue that is clearly coming out is that the issue of electricity is critical, in the continuation of business in this country. And, on top of, and you have, quoted a few numbers, about tripling, electricity connectivity in this country from 3-point-something million to about 7-point-something million people. We have also seen, aggressive efforts being made, to increase, electricity output in this country. And one thing that is coming out clearly is to support small businesses. I mean, what interventionary measures, are we likely to see going forward, from the energy sector by the government to try and support struggling small businesses, bearing in mind that, energy bills, is a huge component in business bills.
Thank you, Brian. One is the government has made a lot of efforts in the last couple of years to the development of what I would call sustainable and cost-effective energy in form of geothermal. That's an area where KenGen has had a lot of support, and we've already put into the grid not less than 400 megawatts. And this year, we will see another 83 megawatts of geothermal added into the grid. And this is one effort and the initiative that brings on board sustainable, reliable, and very competitively priced energy source. Now, as we go on increasing the sustainable and cost-effective sources, we will see a decline in the cost of power. But we must also be very careful that we do not starve the sector, because the sector is self-funding itself at the moment. In terms of what goes into the operations and maintenance and generation of electricity, is not subsidized by the government. What the government subsidized is the many capital investments that goes into also reducing the cost of power through other initiatives that like losses. Once you reduce the losses, then it goes towards reduction of power. At the moment, the SMEs are enjoying the lowest tariff, the second lowest tariff. The lowest tariff is on what we call the lifeline tariff, mainly meant for very poor people in the rural areas who cannot be able even to afford electricity if they are supplied at what we would say is the cost of supplying them. So there is a lot of subsidy to that segment of customers. The SMEs are second lowest, and that initiative was championed by His Excellency the President himself. If you remember, sometimes when he was when he visited the SME fraternity in Strathmore, and they had an engagement, and out of that engagement we brought down we came up with an SME tariff which is fairly I would say is very competitive compared with other segments of customers who are supplied with the power. We will continue on that journey, as I say, but we must maintain a balance. If we reduce the cost too low, we will starve the sector from the funds that it needs to create reliable and sustained power supply, because that is also very important.
Yeah.
Quite a good number of customers will tell you they would not mind paying a high cost but with reliable power, so that they don't have to move to very other expensive uses of power like diesel and so on. So I wanted to re-emphasize on our commitment to continue reducing the cost, but also more importantly to ensuring that the reliability of that supply is ensured, especially in this time when reliable power supply is so critical, because we are living in a digital age. The moment you lose the power, it means you are not able to, you lose communication as well.
Yeah.
When we are talking about hospitals, which really needs to have very reliable power supply so that we do not lose lives because of unreliable power supply.
Good.
So we are exercising that balance, and as time goes on, we'll see reduction, especially when we step up the generation from those low sources.
One of the projects that has come to define the coastal region in Kenya is the Liwatoni crossing channel, the floating bridge. A first one for the region, perhaps the third one in Africa. But I'll be coming back to you, Bonasias, to help us understand how we managed to pull this kind of an infrastructure marvel, in a span of less than 7 months, within budget, and of course ahead of time schedule, a project schedule. But before I come there, I want to hear from you. Just the other day, we saw the Prime Minister of Ethiopia visiting the Lapset project, and more specific, the Lapset, the Lamu port. And this was his words, that he's shocked with the level of development that he has seen, at the port of Lamu. And the question then comes, how have we managed, to ensure that we have delivered this kind of, project, during a pandemic, and at the same time, what should we expect in the year 2021 that if, in case we have Abiy there visiting again, he will still say that I am shocked again?
Thank you, Brian. Definitely, you will recall that we've done a number of interviews with you, among many other media houses, and you've always asked us questions like, now that Ethiopia has greeted Eritrea, now that Ethiopia has greeted Djibouti, now that Ethiopia has greeted Somalia, have we been left behind? And I've always told you that the development of magnanimous infrastructure of the nature of Lapset is not about exclusivity, in that it is only Kenya that can build infrastructure, and it's only Kenya that can trade with its partners, with its neighbors. But it is indeed an integration issue, and it's also being driven at the same time, even under the African Union, that Africa needs to integrate, and even to ensure that we have the free continental trade area really taking root, we need integrating infrastructure, and that is why the Lapset Corridor program is very key, and that is why the commitment by the government of Kenya to deliver on this, as well as other partner states like Ethiopia, is equally building, completing the construction of 500 kilometers of road. In fact, if we add the motorway between Hawassa and Addis Ababa, then you are talking about close to 800 kilometers being constructed in Ethiopia alone, within the Lapset Corridor, to connect the two countries. Definitely, as I did say before, the pandemic was a big shocker globally, and it was equally a shocker in our country. But the readiness by the government to make sure that we manage the situation is what has pushed us thus far. by ensuring that the work environment was kept safe and unpolluted or uncontaminated. And that enabled us, again, to continue with the work. From the time we started the construction works for the port, of course, many naysayers, were saying, will we really deliver? But the consistency and the devotion of resources, as well as, continuing to support those that are participating in the development of this project, has enabled us to actually deliver, as is being seen now. The other important bit of this is that the area in Lamu is indeed one of the key growth frontiers for this country. They are the next growth frontiers, in that the nature of infrastructure that is being put there is among the first in Africa, and is therefore going to redefine global maritime logistics within the continent, and how we also connect to the rest of the globe, and thereby giving us what we can call a global standpoint to be able to compete favorably globally. And why I'm saying globally is that ports are not really just infrastructures that are meant just for a specific area or a region or a country, but they actually expose us to global competition. They expose us to global opportunities, and that is what Lamu Port and the Lapsset Corridor is actually ushering into our economy. And it becomes part of resilience building in our economy, in that we continue to introduce new sectors of the economy, or we continue to introduce new subsectors, new services, and what we can call unique services that are actually required by economies, Africa's economies going forward. The other important aspect is that forward planning is very important. And the government has ensured that under the Vision 2030, and if you look at, again, the four priority agenda, we have kept a very strong policy platform for developing infrastructure, not just for today, but to ensure that as we continue to move into the future, we create a stronger competitive edge for Kenya. We create a stronger competitive edge for East Africa, and also prime Africa's industrial growth going forward.
Yeah.
And this pandemic, I would say, has been a great lesson, not just a negative lesson, but it is also a positive. We've taken it positively, in that the plans that we have, the policies that we have, are actually taking us to the next level where we need to be. Where we are talking about the double-digit economic growth rate, we can only achieve that if we have global infrastructure developing in our economy and taking a lead, facilitative role, enabling role for other sectors also to grow. And as I also mentioned earlier on, within these plans, we are also planning what we are calling the special economic zones, and we are having a new plan for an industrial city to be connected to Lamu Port. All these make the whole of what we are looking for. If you've seen some of the neighboring countries like Ethiopia, you will realize that the development policies that they have are actually very close to what we are having. If you look at their industrial policy, they've actually opened up industrial fronts in different parts of the country, so that they can start to prime what you can call quality urban growth, what you can call quality and sustainable industrial progress. And we are equally also in this country doing the same. So by connecting to Ethiopia again, it is something that brings us to the fore to realize that we need to bring stronger partnerships into our economic development agenda.
Very good.
And that's why the Ethiopian Prime Minister coming to Kenya to see what we've done with regard to the delivery of Lamu Port was actually something of great interest to him. And since that time, we've seen a number of interested traders or even investors in Ethiopia calling us to ask. So it seems that the port is getting ready for us to start exporting through Lamu and importing through Lamu. And I can assure you, 2021 is going to be a year of great interest, particularly as we now open up Lamu Port, as we open up new frontiers in the country, as we also create great opportunities and for many other sectors of the economy. the government is a stronger partner with the private sector. And it is at these difficult times that we've seen many economies redefined. The US, under the Great Depression, actually came up with strategies on how to strengthen resilience in the US economy.
Very good.
And that's what put them forward. And
yes.
we believe what we are doing today with magnanimous infrastructure, transformative infrastructure of the nature of LAPSET corridor, that is what is going to give us the resilience that we are looking for in our economic growth and development.
I can see the CS wants to make some inputs there.
Yes, O'Brien, I think one of the things which I really want to emphasize, this government, led by His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, is a government of results. We, as you have seen, talk about deliverables which are tangible. And we long ago stopped talking about concepts and this and that. What Kenyans want is actually things which you can point at, which has been achieved, and which are benefiting Kenyans. So before I actually comment on what you talked about the Likoni floating bridge, let me add to what Kasuku is saying about this LAPSET corridor. Because if you ask most Kenyans, they may not even know what is LAPSET, the ordinary Kenyan. But what we've done is to create a corridor which is real, which you can say this corridor is starting from here, going to that point, and so forth. Because there's no point, and it will be meaningless, to do a Lamu port, but you do not have actually a corridor which now people can use to connect to the other countries. What you've done is to say now, look, if you're starting from Lamu port, how do you get to Moyale? That is a question which people have to know, because LAPSET, yes, is Lamu port, Southern Sudan, Ethiopia corridor, but they want to know what is the route and have you actually put plans in place to achieve what you are saying. And so in terms of those specific deliverables, there were some missing links. You recall we did a road from Isiolo to Moyale, 530 kilometers, which saved people moving from 3 days to 7 days. That is complete and actually works very well. But if you go downstream now to Lamu, there was no connectivity. And what's the point of doing a Lamu port which is not connected? So what we've done is to say, starting from January, mid-January next month, there's a contract which...
This is 2021?
2021. There's a contract which you commence in mid-January from Lamu Port to Garissa. A contractor has been identified 257 kilometers from Lamu to Garissa. That is phase one. Phase two had been completed actually, because it's from Garissa to Modogash. That already is tarmacked and motorable and no problem. But then thirdly, there was a missing link now from Modogash to Isiolo. And this, what we've done is to agree with the World Bank to support us in the funding. Procurement is an advanced stage. And so when that link is done, so we have the 4 sections, Lamu, Garissa, Modogash to Isiolo, and then Isiolo all the way to Moyale. Then you can say you have a LAPSET corridor. And then from Isiolo, one leg goes towards the west, towards Nakadok in the border with Southern Sudan. This is what we are trying to tell Kenyans, that LAPSET is not a concept anymore. It's real.
It's a project that is happening.
It's happening. Allow me, because of time, I know you wanted to ask me about the issue of the Likoni floating bridge. This is another tangible deliverable. That there's no need of people talking about problems of the ferry, day in, day out. You have to provide solutions. And let me disclose this, what happened. One Saturday morning in July, early July, His Excellency the President was watching a live video in the communication room in State House. This was in the height of COVID. And by then we had started social distancing in terms of the ferry. You could not carry there are many people who used to be carried in the ferry. So because of that, there were long queues, people waiting to board the ferry. And the president looked live pictures in his State House communications room. And so people are walking up to 2 kilometers, waiting now to get to the ferry. 7 o'clock in the morning. And so he called. And
they're on their way to work.
And it was raining, as it was raining in Mombasa, way to work. And he said, this is not sustainable. So me, I was called at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning. And I can tell you for sure, I was having my baba, and I was told, be in State House within 10 minutes. And when I went there, yes, I saw for myself. When I went there, I also found CS Matiang'i. And the president said, we have to have a solution to this. We have to have a solution to what we are seeing now. 2 kilometers, people waiting, carrying babies on the back. In the rain, it is not sustainable. We have to find an alternative to these ferries. And so we told the president, we shall get back to you. That same afternoon, we contacted 2 key global companies. I will not mention their names. 2 global companies. And they came in the afternoon, and we asked them, 2 different countries, give us a solution to this. And one of the companies said, yes, we shall get back to you within a week, which they did. The other company said, we shall give us 2-3 weeks, we consult, but we didn't have time to wait because it was a pandemic, it was an emergency which required a solution. So this company which came and said within 1 week, they came and said, this is a solution. We shall do a floating bridge. On 2 sides, there'll be buried bridges. In the middle, there'll be a floating bridge, what they call the pontoon. And then the 2 will be connected. When the ships are coming, we shall open the pontoon, the floating bridge automatically, so that the ships can continue going to KPA. They said, we shall do this in our home country, which was a Chinese company, that one. They said they would do it in their home country. So work started immediately, mid-July. And that's why when you ask me how was it done within 5.5 months. So work was done in precast, prefabricated in China. At the same time, the buried bridges were done on both sides, anchored in the sea, up to 80 meters down there. And within 3 months, they brought the prefabricated floating bridge. And so they started now fixing the 2. That's why within 5 months, it was ready. Within 5.5 months, His Excellency the President, when they commissioned it. Christmas, everybody was crossing through. And we have never been so happy, O'Brien, to see people, in fact, they were not even walking normally. They were marching, if you saw that, led by the NYS. There is no further joy, no bigger Christmas gift that could have been given by the president other than this one. And I think this is where we say Kenyans should be looking at what has been delivered by this government, what is tangible, as opposed to what people say, you know, in political rallies.
And this actually now brings in a very interesting concept, and that you know, the pandemic has taught the country that things can be done, and things can be done quickly, and things can be done within budget, and things can, and I mean, we can see deliverables. And another project, you know, that is raising eyebrows is the construction of, you know, the expressway. Every morning, you know, you see something different. You see, I don't know whether they call them poles or what they call them, you know, those concrete poles, you know, it's like they are being planted on a daily basis. This project, I mean, is also revolutionizing and making Kenyans to say, hey, look here, things can be done quickly, things can be done fast. First of all, how are we managing to do these, you know, in the era of social distancing and wearing masks and, you know, and sanitizing?
O'Brien, this is a pet project of our CS sitting right here. And I'm telling you, it has been supervised very closely by the CS. He has very robust technical committees. I sit in the technical committee. From the technical point of view, I can say the kind of paradigm shift in terms of project delivery. that has come into the infrastructure sector is something that is phenomenal. People working throughout the nights, technical teams are burning the midnight oil. People are committed, and as the CS says, it is the tangible delivery. What is it that you have done by the end of today? And I would want the CS to comment further about the expressway, because this is really his baby.
Let me not take too much time, because I know you are concerned of time. Just 2 minutes. How this thing was conceptualized. We had gone to China with my team to discuss SGR matters and so forth. One night of a dinner, we told our guests, our hosts, we have come from Beijing airport, 6-lane. We were here within 25 minutes. How was this done? Beijing airport to the city of Beijing. Yeah?
This is Beijing capital?
Beijing capital. They told us, our hosts, that it is them who did that road. Yeah? The 6-lane is them, is their investment. They put that money. So we just asked them casually, if you can do this here in Beijing, why can't you do it in Nairobi? That's a long story. That's how the whole thing started. They say they can do it in the city of Nairobi. What we are seeing there, O'Brien, we haven't put a penny. This is foreign direct investment. And that's why it's so important to create an environment which is conducive to FDI. They have bought properties, one in Roresho, one in Rangata, to precast what you are seeing. So when you are saying that you are seeing things being put every day, they are being precast off-site, then brought at night, and then those piles are put, and then between the piles they have what's called the girders, which are now put automatically. What is important is the technology transfer, which we have seen. That people are building these bridges, because it will be a big bridge from capital city all the way to Westlands. You know, automatically. You're not having those heavy loaders trying to put these girders, you know, on the piles. That helps in terms of speed, in terms of safety, and even in terms of training our engineers. And because of this technology, they have committed, they'll finish most of the work by December 2021.
2021.
This will help us in terms of making Nairobi a more attractive investment destination. And this is what will also be a catalyst for future foreign direct investment. Even this road from Lironi all the way to Mau Summit, 275 kilometers, which we are doing also through the PPP. Those people now, they believe that indeed this thing can be done. Because we started negotiating for expressway long after we started for the Nairobi Mau Summit. So this will be a catalyst for future investment in this country.
Good.
And this is what we need, because now government does not have enough money to start doing new projects. Let's get the private sector. Let banks, like Dr. Mwangi is there, see that these concepts are doable and have confidence in government projects. That way we can work together with banks, key banks like Equity Bank, international banks, to build our infrastructure without constraining the exchequer.
Very well. You know, in the interest of time, because I can see it is well spent, and we're almost going to the lunch hour news, I want to give each and every one of us 2 minutes to predict for us, you know, how the year 2021 is likely to pan out, and how to paint a picture for us, you know, how Kenya will look like in the year 2021. I want to start with you, Dr. James Mwangi, and it's your moment now.
And we certainly look better. I think the health pandemic challenge is now increasingly being brought under control through the vaccine. And so what we will then see is a quick economic recovery as because it's an economic crisis that was brought down by shutdown. So once you remove all these economic shutdowns, then the economy will bounce back heavily. The second aspect is the best of human resilience is likely to come out. We have seen the response in innovations. We have seen repurposing of businesses. We have seen how Kenyans have turned in manufacturing of PPEs, something that was non-existent in March, and now we are a major exporter of PPEs. That resilience is likely to inspire greater and greater innovations in the country. And lastly is greater transformation of the country through these massive investments that the government is putting in terms of infrastructure, whether it is physical infrastructure or soft infrastructure. That is what the private sector have been waiting for. And I'm glad to see that the dreams of Vision 2030 is now being realized.
Very good. Thank you so very much indeed. And also, it's good to appreciate the fact that you are part of the team that has managed to deliver, or that has led to the delivery of Vision 2030, being the immediate chair of Vision 2030 Delivery Board. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Madam CS, it's your turn.
Okay. Thank you. I also share James's, Dr. Mwangi's optimism about 2021. I think what has happened is that we have seen our capacity to cope with the shock of 2020 and still come out stronger. I mean, and some of the numbers that haven't been shared is, I mean, Kenya's economy has still done, okay, it's been hit, but it has done better than many in the region. It gives me hope that there'll be, we can master the same energy to be able to produce some more. A second thing that I mentioned when I was speaking was, we have seen many people, perhaps the induced restrictions, we've seen many people start up new businesses, and especially at the household level. I'll give you a story. I have a relative who went to get chicken from Ken Chicken Nakuru about 3 weeks ago. And they left early in the morning, and they thought they'd be able to be served by 10, and they would do other things. Lo and behold, when they got there, the queue of people who are also purchasing day-old chicks from Kenchik meant that they were on the queue until 4 o'clock. And we thought perhaps Kenchik hadn't planned well, but Kenchik said actually, there's just been a surge in demand.
Yeah.
And that shows two things, that people are also showing initiative and figuring out how to survive during tough times. The numbers we've seen in the country of registered new businesses has increased. So I am hopeful, I am confident that people will apply themselves to production, even if it is for self-sustenance, but it is also the things that is going to drive the economy. One of the things that we didn't get to talk about is that Kenya is, in the process of concluding major trade agreements with the Americas, which would secure us the market. We concluded a trade agreement with the UK conducted virtually, which also guarantees us security of market. So that is enough of a signal for people that they can produce and that there will be an export market for their products. We didn't used to grow avocados 3, maybe 5 years ago, but now we are the 7th largest producer in the world. So there is a resilience and there is a productivity in Kenya that they will apply themselves to, because first of all, they're clearly thinking about their own livelihood. So
very well.
That, for me, that self-sustenance spirit and self-preservation is what will tide Kenyans over in the new year.
Thank you very much. Thank you indeed for your input. Yes, Engineer, quickly.
I think 2021 is a year of great hope. We still have the same strong leadership that has demonstrated prompt action and directed leadership. Those protocols and the proper observation of them, they have been sung from the Minister of Health, from the presidency. We still have in this panel major leaders like Dr. Mwangi, CS Minor, CS James Mshere. They are still in place. They have gone through the hard times. The storms are over now.
Yeah.
They have learned to swim. I think we have great hope in 2021.
Thank you.
And with that, I think next year will be a year of great hope.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. With the lessons that we have learned, and particularly adaptation, which we already have in place, we will sustain the momentum. At the far end of the supply chain, we expect to see more customers being connected. We expect minimum 500,000 customers connected in the year. We expect also to start a very crucial project of mini grids in 14 underserved counties. Those are the counties mainly in the north and northeastern part of the country, which are very far from the grid. And that project will bring in eventually about 27,000 customers into the grid and very many other public facilities. At the same time, we will also see more streetlights, especially in the urban areas. If you free this country from north to south, this time you'll see a big difference that even at night, most of the urban centers are well lit. And this is so important for security and also for 24/7 economy. It's a very great enabler. In the middle section, we'll see transmission lines, very crucial transmission lines. One of those lines is from Okaria, Lesos, Kisumu, which we expect to see its implementation fully by February, so that those customers in the western part of the country will start enjoying quality power. Then we'll also see an interconnection between ourselves and Ethiopia, a line which is very high voltage, 500 kilovolts direct current line, completed within the year, and that will enable us be able to exchange power between ourselves and Ethiopia. Then we'll also see Kenya and Tanzania interconnected, and at the same time Kenya and Uganda interconnected with a very high voltage line.
Asante.
Far into the start, the generation part, we will see more geothermal coming into the grid. We have an 83 megawatts, one of the units in Okaria. We call it Okaria 1 Unit 6. It's 83 megawatts. It will come into the grid. There will be a wind project, 100 megawatts, and smaller hydropower projects,
and all these
of
projects
about
are
10
coming
megawatts.
Into fruition
all
next
these
year.
should be coming on board this year.
Thank you very
much. So we will
much.
continue with the momentum. We will sustain. And as I say, the lessons which we have learned and the adaptation
will be applied.
Working within the COVID protocols, we'll be able to sustain that momentum.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, Kasuku, 1 minute.
Thank you. Definitely 2021, I would say, will be a year of optimism and enthusiasm. Definitely continued delivery of strategic infrastructure of the nature of LAPSET, among the others that the CS already spoke about. Continued adaptation and strengthening utilization of ICT in government operations and businesses is again going to strengthen our resilience. Definitely continued industrial growth, as already said by the CS trade. We also have regional integration as we open up the LAPSET corridor to connect with Ethiopia and South Sudan.
Very well.
I know the CS wanted to mention the road that is going to South Sudan, currently under construction. And we are therefore strengthening, opening up of new markets, the new business frontiers.
Thank you.
We are also talking about when Lamu opens up, then we are talking about a new global maritime platform that is going to strengthen Kenya's competitiveness.
Asante.
And also we wouldn't forget the fact that there's going to be a stronger investment focus in Kenya, taking note of the resilience that we have shown, our openness by being very clear on declaring our COVID status as a country and putting into place appropriate coping mechanisms. That is a lesson around the globe.
Thank you. Yes, PS.
Yeah, very briefly, I would like to just point three things which I would like to see. First one is consolidation of what we have started. I will not be too keen to start many new projects because we are in a difficult situation. Complete what we have started in 2021 and consolidate that achievement. Number two, I would like to see the counties becoming more economically independent. I know a few counties have started their own economic programs, even small businesses and so forth. Make sure that development is decentralized. Number three, make sure that we also have a global airline industry coming back the way it was before. Because without that, we can't talk about global markets which are very important for us. That is critical for us because we are part of the global village.
Asante. Thank you so very much indeed for finding time to be with us this morning and of course this afternoon. For Dr. James Mwangi and CS Betty Minor, who have been online, asante sana for dedicating your time to be part of this great discussion. I take this opportunity to thank you all and to wish you a prosperous and a beautiful year ahead of you. And of course, let's all continue to make Kenya a great country. And together we shall, of course, conquer this COVID-19 pandemic. Asante sana for your time.
Thank you.
Well, indeed, even in the midst of a crisis, we'll still make it, and we are making it. Thank you for watching the year 2020 in focus. Kenya is still a great country. Ours is still a beautiful country. Let's continue with the story of Kenya, a beautiful story indeed that we shall tell generations to come. My name is O'Brien Kimani. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your holidays. And of course, the lunchtime news is coming up next. Asante sana. Happy New Year ahead of you. Bye for now.